Hello, and welcome to another episode of NAS's podcast on equity, diversity, and inclusion within school psychology. I am Shayla Desai, the NAS Director of Educational Practice. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm honored to be the host of this series. This episode will focus on professional issues, especially diversifying the field and professional leadership, as well as the role of research in advancing EDI within school psychology. Today, I am joined by guests Monica Oganis, Kamante Heidelberg, and Jane Wong. Monica, Kamante, and Jane, could you please briefly share a bit about your current role and anything you're comfortable sharing about your identities, including areas of intersectionality? Monica, why don't we start with you?
I am so happy to be here, Shayla, in such an important topic. I work in private practice, but I have experience working in the schools and hospital settings. And since the beginning of my school career, I have focused on the issue of diversity. It is so important that we really understand that unless we address diversity, we are not really engaging in best practice. So in that capacity, I've worked with NASP in the Multicultural Affairs Committee, in the Bilingual Interest Group, and many committees at my state association, FASP, in order to promote this area of practice. So I'm very happy to be here and to talk about this important topic.
Thanks, Monica. Kamante, want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Kamante Heidelberg. I'm currently an assistant professor at the University at Buffalo. I'm really excited to be here today, as Monica has said, to talk about such an important conversation and topic area. I'm a researcher and I conduct my research on individual at systems level interventions to support the positive social, emotional, as well as academic development of African-American students. So with that, my research entails making culturally responsive interventions to ensure that they're being more effective with particular populations. So like I said, I focus on African-American students. So I ensure that we are adapting our interventions to meet the needs of one of our most marginalized populations of students. So I'm excited to share my expertise and be involved in this conversation today.
Thanks. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay. So my name is Jane Wong, and I'm just as excited as both Kamante and Monica to be here. I'm currently pursuing my doctoral degree in school psychology on a bilingual track at St. John's University. Prior to that, I hold a Master of Arts degree in social personality psychology. So before my school psychology career, I was a researcher developing psychological assessments, and including tests such as the Ortiz Picture Vocabulary Acquisition Test. My research interest, it's really about the fair assessment of culturally and linguistically diverse individuals. I have collaborated with Dr. Samuel Ortiz on book chapters such as psychoeducational assessment of culturally and linguistically diverse preschool children. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about this really important topic, especially as a representation within the Asian community.
Thank you all. So to get us started, I wanted to talk a little bit about our profession. As we all know, it is predominantly female and white. And while there have been continued efforts and the need to diversify our field, there are some barriers to entry. So I'm curious, what barriers did you notice in your path to joining the profession? Kamante, want to start?
Yeah, sure. I can start. So I identify as a Black American male, or specifically African American. So I noticed that coming into the field that it was not a lot of individuals that look like me, a lot of other Black males within school psychology. So I was fortunate actually to be in a program where there was a Black male school psychologist. So I just looked at the relationship and the mentoring that I received, and it actually it hurts to see that other people are not receiving as much support and services that were kind of involved in helping with me regarding that mentoring. So I really just wanted that to be something that highlighted and regarding what I do into this field, regarding getting more African-American males into this field, so we can provide that mentorship, those supports, and those opportunities that individuals like me need. Because as we talk about our field, it's very white woman dominated, and our students are really diverse. So they need to have that representation and to see individuals like themselves. And particularly talking about Black males, that's one of our populations where we're seeing that we need to implement more of our supports and services to really help have equitable outcomes. So I think that's something that gears me and drives me into this field, and something I want to do more of, getting more individuals look like me, in particular, just more diverse individuals in this field to support our diverse students.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Jane, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like just like Kamante mentioned, I feel the same way. I don't see that many Asian school psychologists that that I could look up to. And if you talk about, it's great that I think we have about 3.3% of Asian school psychologists, according to a school psychologist statistics study. That's, you're talking about very, very small population there. And within that population, you have even smaller percentage of individuals who can actually speak Chinese or any kind of native language. I think if you talk about barriers entering the field, I personally did not sense a lot, or I should say, it's kind of like, in spite of the challenges for English learners, I was able to, when I immigrated from Hong Kong to Canada when I was 14, I was fortunate enough that I actually went to a bilingual school in Hong Kong. And so I was able to kind of bring over some of the cognitive, academic, language proficiency, or CALB, in my first language, and then I can transfer it over in terms of like the learning of second language. And so I was able to kind of develop both basic interpersonal communication skills in Chinese, and then over to English, and then also build upon my CALB in English. So in a way, I felt like I was very lucky. And then I stumbled upon psychology. And because psychology is such, especially in school psychology, being able to communicate with clients and also write essays or reports, those are very important skills that generally can be challenging for English learners. So in a way, I feel very fortunate. At the same time, if you're talking about within the population of Asian school psychologists who can actually make it in the field, they tend to be second or third generation, Asian immigrants. So they are very much, mainstream in terms of like, their English, very fluent in both oral written. It's much harder for English learner, someone who speaks very fluent native language, to get into the field. So I feel like that's one barrier that really stops, a lot of people in the track in terms of, like, can I get into this field? Can I do this? And then what it translates to is that, a lot of our families, Asian families, do not have individuals who can speak the language or have a good understanding of really the cultural intricacies. So I feel like those are, some of the barriers that we might need to address later on in terms of like, well, how do we increase diversity in the field?
Yeah, that's a really good point about English language learners and how that can impact then other Asian families in the school community. Monica, what about you?
So I worked as the Latino co-chair for the Multicultural Affairs Committee at NAS for over a decade, and represented the Latino population. And of course, the Hispanic Latinos in the US are over 18% right now, but we know that the growth is so big that by the year 2050, we expect about 25% to be, Latino, Hispanic. And that's a very large number of people who are represented. But as I look at the field and what is happening, we are really not catching up to really represent the population, because Jane spoke about something very important, many of the people that are here in this country, in this subgroup of the population, are English learners. I myself came in second grade and I was an English learner, and I have so many interesting stories about not being included or considered, within the instructional supports in the classroom when I was in the classroom myself. So I kind of see myself as those children that we serve. But as I grew up, and of course I went back to my home country, Peru, and I went to a dual language school and so forth, and then came back here after I had a bachelor's degree in Peru, studying in Spanish. And what was interesting, and what I think about right now, is that many programs have requirements to enter the school psychology programs, such as the GRE, entrance exams, or some requirements in portfolios that individuals from diverse populations and English learners are not really able to meet. So I'm in private practice now, and I get applications by so many people. And one interesting aspect that I speak about with my colleagues is that, what about these people that are not really able to write fluently, yet the profession requires people, because we write reports, to write fluently? So what are we doing to really address those issues? Because we do need people that represent diversity and the diverse populations, and we need people like with Jane's background and Kamante's background. But how are we really addressing those issues that are important, but we must take into account, and we must, it's not about saying, you know what, you don't have the English skills yet, so you're not going to pass a GRE, or you're not going to pass this requirement, so you're not really competing at the same playing field as a monolingual English speaker, or as a white, even female or male, right? So we really have to do better at really looking at all of those aspects, because we need to equalize the playing field. We need it to be accessible to everybody, because the minoritized populations are not really competing at the same level. So we have to think about all those issues. And I know it happened to me, because I had to, take exams and so forth. And I think I did well in the profession, but imagine all the hurdles that I had to go through. Some people can't even access even a percentage of what I was able to access because of the opportunities that I had. So we really need to do better.
That makes a lot of sense. And you bring up a good point about the GRE, and I'm hearing kind of informally from some programs are starting to consider waiving that requirement for school psychology admissions. And so I'm wondering if things will trend in that direction in the future or not, but time will tell on that. So
Yeah,
moving
I
on.
mention that because of COVID, for example, since the St. John's School Psychology program, we usually would require GRE scores, but because of COVID, that's been waived for this incoming cohort. But St. John's program also has a bilingual track, so I think in general it does attract maybe more of more diverse students. But it'll be interesting to see if we're keeping that, and if like over time that translates into more diverse type of applications. I think like Monica mentioned, there's still, other than the GRE, there are all other barriers in terms of like being able to have good command to write reports. So let's see.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted to ask all of you, as school psychologists of color, how do you navigate issues of racism and racial trauma, either personally or on behalf of your students and families, while working within a profession that has made some strides towards socially just practices, but still has a long way to go? Jane, do you want to start?
Sure. I think I'm still really new to the career. I have, I'm almost complete with my externship at a school district, and it's a very diverse school district. So I've been lucky that I haven't really come across any type of racial trauma. At the same time, obviously, I am living in New York, and so I am exposed to a lot of the sad news about the increase of Asian hate crimes, and so kind of working through that currently. And I've thought about, like when I work with families, for example, when I, do CSE meeting and I talk to some of my minority students' family, like how much do we, there's definitely, perhaps an elephant in the room, how do you kind of convey the empathy and understanding, and when is it appropriate to do so? I think that's like really difficult to navigate. I think because I work with very young population elementary schools, so I think it probably would be a bigger issue when it comes to working with high school students, likely. In general, like, I'm kind of like sensitive and just kind of, watching out, but like my kids are generally fairly happy. But I think that's, really an area where in terms of my personal experience, that, I do have to kind of like make sure that I give myself enough self-care, make sure that gives me enough capacity to help, to work with the students that I work with, and not to kind of, or my clients with telehealth, make sure that, that area, that I have enough capacity to, do my best on my job. So that's like one thing that I've been kind of paying attention to.
Thank you. How about you, Monica?
So since the beginning of my career as a school psychologist, I was very interested in the issue of racism. And specifically, I kind of focused on the issue of, bilingual cultural diversity as it relates to language. So what I've been focusing on lately is the issue of linguistic discrimination. I know that, in my research and the focus of things that I wrote in the past, I was most always interested in bilingualism, but the issue that we need to highlight is that diverse or linguistically diverse populations also face racism just because they have a different language background. So I know myself, when in different schools, I had been told by principals or leaders in the district that I was not allowed to speak Spanish within the time that I was working in the district. And although it did not come from top leadership, which was a good thing, I was very surprised that back in the within the last 10 years or 15 years, in this day and age, we would still have people that believe that speaking another language in this country is not something positive and something to be celebrated. So the focus for me has been to bring diversity to the forefront by, joining, of course, NASP and being in leadership, and to really bring in a lot of training to peers, to other educators, and trying to really highlight the issues of best practice as it relates to linguistic diversity. Because I do believe that not addressing these diversities and just practicing, just turning your eye to all the difficulties that these populations face is also a form of racism or discrimination. Many of our children who are from different cultural backgrounds face collective trauma just by being part of specific populations that are discriminated against and traumatized. And we have to address that as a group, because as a group we have that trauma when we see political forces and political division because a group of the population is targeted, like the Asian American, the Latinos, and we're thugs or we are criminals. That hurts personally. That for us in the field, that hurts because we are part of those populations. So we have such a long way to go. Yet I am also encouraged at all of the work that our colleagues are doing, the school psychology group. at NASP and, outside of NASP, we are all really doing a good job at standing together and saying, enough is enough. We do not ignore this anymore. And we are going to open our eyes and start working together, becoming allies to each other, because we at some point we're an ally, at some point we're a marginalized group. So we have to work together, and we're doing it. But we still have a long way to go.
Agreed. And thank you for sharing. Kamante, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question, because even if we think about the statement or the saying school psychologist of color, I think our color, our identity, as a school psychologist is subsequent to our racial, our ethnic identity. I know for myself, as a Black man in America, that's something that you see first. You don't see that I'm a school psychologist or have obtained or hold a doctoral degree. You see that I'm a Black man in America, and we have seen the continuous negative interactions and institutional barriers that have been placed on the marginalized communities, particularly Black men. So I really speak to like Monica's point when we're talking about that discrimination, and that some of us really experience that just from the color of our skin. So I think as a Black man in America that is a school psychologist, I think we talk about racism and navigating this. This is something that's not new to our country and to the experiences that we have. This is something that we've been navigating for a while. I think back to a scholar, maybe James Baldwin, who stated to be Black in America and to be relatively conscious is to be always in a state of rage, because this is something that's been going on forever. So being a Black scholar, we have to learn to kind of navigate these barriers and these institutional barriers that are in place to kind of show up and still be able to do our jobs. And we have to acknowledge that that's hard. We see that it's really hard to show up to work once you're just seeing someone who looks like you murdered on a television screen, and you still have to show up as a school psychologist to support others. So what we do is already hard, but when we add on that marginalized identity, our work becomes even more challenging and hard to do. So I think it's very, very important for us as individuals of colors who are particularly discriminated against in a marginalized group is to have community of resistance or just community of supports. So those are those other individuals who look like you, who maybe speak the same language, or who maybe have some of those shared experiences, but also looking at, as Monica was iterating, some of those allies and other individuals who do not look like you, but who may be engaged in some of the same research or who understand some of those experiences that want to do better. I think building those community supports is really, really helpful for us as scholars of color, just to be able to still show up and to be able to do this work, but also to really start to make that change. We know that we can't do this ourselves. We need others to come in and kind of fight this fight with us. So I think that also kind of speaks to that, to where we're pulling each other in to finally start to really waking up and to be able to advocate for those individuals who are in need to be able to kind of get to those equitable outcomes that we want to see within education and in our country as a whole.
Absolutely. Those are great points. I want to shift gears a little bit in talking about some experiences with leadership roles and positions. Monica and Kamante, I know both of you have held various positions, and I'm curious how diversity or lack of diversity in professional leadership has affected the way that you've grown in your career, and if you've sought mentorship or allyship in order to kind of navigate that. Monica, would you like to start?
Sure. As I mentioned, from early on in my career, I was part of NASP leadership as the Latino co-chair of the Multi-Quarter Affairs Committee. And I was so proud of doing that work as a Latino woman because I represented that population, which is a very large number of school psychologists, children, families that we work with. But at the same time, being in that field or in that area of expertise and practice, I noticed that there are so many needs out there that we just had to do more and more and more. And the time was just like not there to do so many of the things that came to my head that I thought, oh, I could do this and I could do that. because it really is so overwhelming to think about all of the things that we need to do in order to provide equal access to all of our populations of children, families we serve, and also our colleagues, because we need to advocate for our work and for ourselves and for knowledge and for leadership. So that was part of, the role that I took on, as I did a little bit of that. But at the same time, I was doing state leadership, and with FASP, I had been FASP president, and professional development chair, school neuropsychology chair, and so many other leadership roles. But in every single role, I know that I brought that diversity piece. So for me, being a leader in any role whatsoever, it needed to have diversity attached to it, because I strongly believe that best practice cannot be achieved unless we look at diversity and all of the issues that we're discussing today. So for me, it is important to really kind of like build those relationships. And certainly throughout my career, I started with being mentored when I was a student, or first, second, third year into my career, and people that I looked up to, and I always gravitated toward them and went to their workshops, and they did some projects together, supported the development of tests with them and so forth, because I really wanted to be involved and be part of the change and do something to promote diversity. But at the same time, they became my colleagues, where I was doing the work and I was mentoring others. So when I work with students, and I have been supervisor for internship, practicum, and many other students, I try to select those who need that kind of training, maybe individuals of color who also need to have a supervisor who provide and can facilitate and promote that level of knowledge in order to really get out there and do the work that we need to do. So it is important, as Camonte said, that we have to become allies and seek those people in leadership that could complement what we bring to the table. So everybody has their own skills, but also be willing to share and to be leaders and to really take on other students and to mentor, because we cannot be isolated and keep our knowledge. We all have something to share. So it is important that we, as community school psychologists of color, get out there and be ready and willing to take on people in training or colleagues who really want to understand and learn about these diversity issues that some of us know a little bit more about because we live it. But at the same time, we take care of ourselves, like was mentioned before, because it is a lot of work. And just recently, even though my role in diversity has started since early on in my career, I have felt that rage that Camonte mentioned, because sometimes it's like, it's too much. It's like, I really don't want to even hear the news anymore. It is just too much. So there's a long way to go, but we have to really step up. And, with the support of every other colleague, we have to do it.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. And as I was listening to you talking, it is absolutely so important to be at the table and to have these leadership roles and bring people along with you. But I also hear and feel the sense of like the burden of having to be that person who represents diversity on a board when maybe you're the only person that looks different. So, it's interesting to both have kind of the pleasure as well as the burden of kind of pushing the work forward. Camonte, what about you? Can you speak a little bit about your experiences with leadership and how you've navigated those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just kind of building off of that point, it is a burden for those individuals who are in those spaces and kind of occupy those to be able to pull others on and to kind of give back. But I think that's also a part of we're kind of obligated to do so, particularly when we're coming from a marginalized community. I just speak to my own experiences. Although we do not have a lot of African-American school psychologists, we have some very, very pronounced and really outstanding African-American school psychologists. So I was fortunate to be able to be mentored by some of those individuals and just be able to have some of that guidance. So I kind of felt as if they were reaching back and kind of pulling me up so I can do the same and reach back and pull someone else up so we can kind of have that continuum of supports to start getting to where we want to be. So it's really hard, but I just think to my experiences, I've really sought out those diverse individuals within our field who were doing things. So I even think about when I was a graduate student, I joined the NAS mentoring program, and I was connected with a Black male school psychologist. And from there, they integrated me into all of the various NAS aspects. In addition, I also had the mentoring and advising I was seeing from my program. So they were connecting with other scholars that were Black. And I just found myself kind of latching onto those individuals, just speaking about the research and always hearing about the problems associated with being a Black male and some of those barriers. I wanted to be around someone who was talking about solutions to those, because we know the problem, but we need to start getting to what are we going to do about the problem. So as I was speaking, I was really fortunate to have some of those scholars who were African-American and doing this work to mentor me and provide me with guidance. So they were adding me to different projects and helping me to scaffold myself and build my research agenda, and just all around these supports, because they understood the barriers and the challenges that I were getting ready to face. And they kind of came with the mindset that if they can remove some of those barriers that they face, it's making it better for the next generation. I think that's something I feel like I'm tasked with as well, is to continue to provide and make sure we're having those equitable outcomes so our next future generations don't have to go through some of the same problems that we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Kamante, I also wanted to ask you a bit about your role as a researcher and thinking about how research, there was a recent study that noted that most of the research that was included on a popular best practices site did not include Black children in their samples. So as a researcher, can you talk a little bit about why it's so important that work centers racially and ethnically minoritized students and families, and why having that in research is so important to the future of our field?
Yes, absolutely. I'll try to be quick because I want to be respectful of our time. I just think that that question really gets to answering the question, evidence-based for who or effective for who. If we don't include a diverse sample within our studies, we can't say our results are going to generalize to all children. We know that every child is very different and every child is unique. So that's why it's very important to make sure our sample size include as much of a diverse sample of our student population, so we can really talk about generalization of our results. So meaning that we are having these evidence-based interventions be inclusive of various samples of different populations of students. And if not, we're not saying these results are generalizable to other populations of students. So I think that's something we as researchers have to do a much better job of. And I can acknowledge there are barriers to accessing certain populations of students. However, as researchers, we have to kind of be tasked with bringing down those barriers and navigating that, so we can provide those supports to those students, but really start talking about evidence-based interventions and what that means for all students. So I think just having that, we have a lot of interventions, and that's where my research comes into play, is to making cultural adaptations to those interventions or making them more culturally responsive. So even then, one of the studies that I just got recently published, we took school-wide PBIS, which is very well known and implemented in the various schools, and we utilized some of the fidelity from a school district, and we found that even when schools were meeting school-wide PBIS fidelity, they were still having disproportionate discipline outcomes, particularly for Black students. So that really just made us go ahead and to realize that we not only have to say that we have evidence-based or effective frameworks or practices, but we really have to make sure they're culturally responsive and meeting the needs of those individuals. And if not, then we're just kind of doing a disservice and continuing that barriers and the system of oppression.
Thanks so much. And that's such important work. So thank you for kind of moving it forward. So a couple questions that I want to wrap up with is, I'm curious your thoughts, everyone, on what stakeholders have the power to decide that social justice is central to school psychology, and how have you found ways to engage these stakeholders, if at all? Kamante, you want to start with this one?
I want to kind of bring in Jane while I just kind of formulate my thoughts, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Kind of going with you, Jane, too.
Yeah, so I believe like Monica talked about, getting into the leadership role. So she actually brought me onto the NASPA bilingual interest group. So on the leadership team. So that's been great, where we have been able to connect among bilingual school psychologists and just kind of, exchange ideas. At the same time, I also feel like, Kamante and Monica both talk about the importance of pulling in allies. And I think that has to be done in terms of, really getting people who are in the majority group to really help us out. Like there has to be, diversity within any kind of leadership community or kind of advocacy team. It can't just be the minority person just trying to, get screaming, we need help. We really need to bring in different voices. And in terms of, I think, we all know the NASP or state association, they really work with or they work together in terms of social media campaign, Twitter, using different ways, and then also those action alert where they create those pre-made templates where it makes it easy for everybody to just sign on, put in our name, address, etc., and then just send in those emails to lawmakers. I think those are really important to put pressure on the just kind of mainstream culture to kind of take notice of issues related to marginalized communities. And then also, I think we really need to think about how to disseminate all the information we have within research to a larger audience, make that information kind of easy to digest for everybody, so that, just to increase awareness. So I think those would be the important things we need to look at.
Thank you. Monica, what do you think?
So a couple of things come to mind, especially because we are, working within racism so much recently, which is a great thing. But I like to think, that concept that, how oppressors don't really get to decide how the oppressed want change or want access or need access, because they have been the oppressors for so long. So it really is the people that are in minoritized groups who are the ones that have to come forward and say, this is what we need, because this is how I feel. This is what it makes me feel like. And we have to start listening more and really understanding and being involved in learning about other groups. So as we know what's going on in different parts of the world that affect our society here within the US, we really have to start learning and understanding about the different groups, about the different political issues, social issues, and everything that is happening. So if we look at it at the global level affects our profession. So we can't just look at it as a professional issue alone, because we have to look at what's going on in society as a large group. But then within school psychology, NASP has done a good job at having different groups represented in like multicultural affairs committees and, the social justice, newer than the multicultural affairs committee, but the social justice committee and so many other groups. But I think we, like Kamante said, we need to really represent more of the groups and really be very observant of what these groups are doing, because these are the groups that are going to bring change. Jane mentioned the bilingual interest group. We have grown so much, and within the last year, we have been doing so much to diversify or to really bring to light this issue of linguistic diversity. But just like our subgroup, there are so many other groups that are doing such fantastic work that we really need to listen. And I believe that associations such as NASP and state associations really have to start thinking about all of these groups and how are we going to promote and how are we going to take into account their work in order to be a better association. How, for instance, if we have proposals coming up How are we going to ensure that those reviewers are really looking at topics that are submitted and really including all of those topics in the future offerings at conference next year? Because I can share with you at some point or another, I thought, oh, I have this fantastic, offering on issues of diversity, or I have had colleagues doing this work, but they were declined. And a lot of it has to do with the interest of the reviewers. So if they're not interested in the topic, sometimes, they may not be rating those reviews. So how are we changing our entire system to ensure that these topics are represented in issues of social justice and in issues of training, in issues of, developing interventions and research, because it's really not one aspect. It's all of us at the, student level and faculty level and practitioner, clinician level, educators, but also state and national associations that really have to, at some point, be a stakeholder, at some point, be the one that affects change, but also the one that listens to make sure that really we make social justice central in the future of school psychology.
That makes a lot of sense. Monte, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just really be quick and say we all have a role, honestly, in this. We can, as we talked about, be allies. And I think even just moving forward, that we're kind of moving past allies and going to more advocates or organizers, and what I like to call it dismantlers, where we're really starting to take down systems of oppression. But I think in doing so and getting to true equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice, is that we all have to have a role within this. It's just going to look very, very different based on our expertise, our experiences, and kind of just some of our willpower to do so. I just even think back to what we're doing at the University of Buffalo within our school psychology program. All of the faculty, students, and staff read the Racial Healing Handbook. And I think that was something that helped us all to realize within our journeys that we all have a role in this, and we can choose to really be a part of the solution or the problem, but that's really our choice.
Thank you. And that's a perfect segue to our last question. I wanted to ask each of you, in your respective role, if you had to choose one action to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in school psychology, what would that be? Jane, do you want to start?
Yeah, so in relation to what Commander was talking about, I feel like, or I think Monica also mentioned that, I feel like educating the next generation of school psychologists in terms of importance of, cultural and linguistic diversity. And it's not just, taking just one course within the training, because a lot of times I think, because of all the different topics we have to cover, cultural diversity kind of becomes that one course that people take, and really how much are we really immersing our students in that kind of topic. I know students who are on our bilingual track, we tend to have more exposure to that kind of topic, but in all ways, we have to remember that those, a lot of the best practices guidelines, we talk about how all school psychologists have the responsibility to, promote and advocate for, different diverse individuals from diverse cultures. So it's not just the job of, the minority school psychologists. It should be the job of every single school psychologist. And so I feel like we really need to look at what it's being taught in, or the paradigm of thinking that is being taught in different school programs, and how can we kind of get everybody involved. And I think because this work has to continue on, and so that would be my thought about one thing that we really should focus on.
Absolutely, thank you. Kamante, any other additional thoughts? I know you kind of covered this in your last response.
Yeah, I think I would just build on that too, just of that theme of building the next generation. So I think one actual step we could take is really just increasing that funding for our graduate students entering into our program, and even starting earlier from undergrad to even high school. I know within NAS, we're doing something like the NAS Exposure Project, to where we're going to different high schools and undergrads and exposing them to the field of school psychology. And that's something we have to be able to do. But I think it'd be even cool if we had scholarship money or other things attached to that, so we can really start to getting to removing those barriers. And I know as someone from a marginalized groups, that financial barrier is typically one that's a big inhibitor for a lot of our students. So I think if we can start really putting, as we say, our money where our mouth is, we're doing this work, we're talking about it, but let's start really funding the students, because I think that's where we're losing a lot of the great quality students that we could have, and to start diversifying our field.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. And Monica, we'll close out with you.
Oh, yes. And the one thing that I focused on and thinking about, that crisis brings something good all the time. And we are in the middle of a pandemic, right? And what did the pandemic bring is the ability to meet virtually and normalizing that ability. So what happened with it within the bilingual interest group this year is that we moved on something that was always a prevalent topic, which is people were isolated. They wanted to come and meet with us, and they wanted to talk about these topics and get training, but there was no access because we have so many students and we have so many practitioners out in the middle of nowhere sometimes, with no supervisor, with nobody to talk about issues of diversity, about social justice, equity. And then this particular issue was bilingual school psychology, which is this particular group. So what did we do? We started doing monthly meetups. So we have virtual meetups, and we have a database of like 800 people interested in bilingual topics that we get maybe sometimes close to 100 people in our meetups. So what do we do as leaders? We advance the topics by thinking out of the box and thinking about bringing the information to people's homes through virtual modalities. So I think access is very important in our work, and we have to really continuously think about, we can provide all of the training and we can create all the modules, but if people do not have access, the training is going to stay behind and not going to advance and not going to reach as many people. So I'm hoping that all of these efforts and great ideas that Jane and Kamante brought to the table, we think, how do we have everything accessible so it's more equitable at the same time?
Agreed. Yeah, access is the key, like the cornerstone of equity, right? So I totally agree. Monica, Kamante, and Jane, I very much appreciate the time you spent with everyone today. It has been such a pleasure to hear from all of you, and I very much thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us. For everyone listening, thanks for joining and taking an interest in these important issues. We look forward to the rest of the series and hope you'll tune in for the next episode. For more information on EDI topics and social justice, please check out the NASP website. Thanks, and see you next time.